خب سلام. فصل دوم کتاب رو میخوایم بخونیم با هم، کتاب آرزوهای بزرگ. مدلمون هم اینطوریه که کتاب رو میخونیم، یه سری کلمه ها داره، کلمه ها رو با هم معنیش رو میبینیم و همزمان با هم کشف میکنیم که داستان کتاب چیه و کلمات تو در توش رو با هم در میاریم با هم. اوکی. Chapter 2 Catching a Convict. یکی از کلماتی بود که سری پیشم بود توی فصل 1. Convict. A person found guilty of a criminal offense and serving a sentence of imprisonment. گناهکار. All that morning I was frightened that my sister would discover that I had stolen from her. But luckily, she was so busy cleaning the house and roasting the chickens for our Christmas lunch that she did not notice that I had been out or that any food was missing. At 1:30 or 2 guests arrived. نیم ساعت پیش یکی از دوتا مهمون ما رسیده بود. Mr. Hoopsell had a large nose and a shining bald forehead and was the church clerk. Bald. Having a scalp wholly or partly lacking hair. Mr. Pumblecook, who had a shop in the nearest town, was a fat, middle-aged man with a mouth like a fish and staring eyes. He was really Joe's uncle, but it was Mrs. Joe who called him uncle. Every Christmas Day, he arrived with 2 bottles of wine, handing them proudly to my sister. Oh, Uncle Pumblechook. This is kind, she always replied. It's no more than you deserve, was the answer every time. Sitting at table with these guests, I would have felt uncomfortable even if I hadn't robbed my sister. کنار روی یه میز با این مهمون ها نشستن احساس ناراحتی، ناخوشایندی میداد، حتی اگر که با خواهرم فکر می‌کنم حتی اگر سرقتی به خواهرم نزده باشم. Not only was Pumblechook's elbow in my eye, but I wasn't allowed to speak. Elbow, the joint between the forearm and the upper arm. متصل کننده یا دست بالایی و دست پایینی میشه آرنج. But I wasn't allowed to speak, and they gave me the worst pieces of meat. اجازه نداشتم صحبت کنم و بدترین قسمت گوشت رو به من دادن. Even the chickens must have been ashamed of those parts of their body when they were alive. and worse than that, the adults never left me in peace. میگه که حتی خود مرغم و از اون قسمت بدن شرم داشته وقتی که زنده بوده و بدتر از اون که بزرگسالا هیچ وقت من رو راحت نمیذاشتن. The adults never left me in peace. راحت نذاشتن. Left me in peace. مسئله قبلی که میشد نه تنها آرنج پامپلچوک در چشمم بود. Not only was Pumpelchuk's elbow in my eyes, but I wasn't allowed to speak. حتی اجازه صحبت کردن هم نداشتم. Before we eat, let us thank God for the food in front of us, said Mr. Wopsle in the deep voice he used in church. با صدای عمیقی که در کلیسا ازش استفاده میکنه اون دعا رو کرد. Do you hear that? Whispered my sister to me. Be grateful. Whispered. A soft or confidential tone of voice, whispered word or phrase. Do you hear that? به صورت پچ‌پچ کردن. Whispered my sister to me. Be grateful. شنیدیش؟ شکرگزار باش. Especially, said Mr. Pumpelchuk firmly. به طور محکم از روی ثبات. Said Mr. Pumpelchuk firmly. Be grateful, boy, to those who brought you up by hand. شکرگزار باش پسر از کسی که با دستاش تو رو بزرگ کرده. Why are the young never grateful? Wondered Mr. Wopsle sadly. چرا جوان‌ها هیچ وقت شکرگزار نیستند؟ اینو مستر ووپسل میگه با ناراحتی. Their characters are naturally bad, answer Mr. Pumpelchuk. میگه ذات طبیعیشون بده. And all three looked unpleasantly at me. Unpleasantly. All three looked unpleasantly at me. ستایی خیلی ناگوار داشتن به من نگاه میکردن. When there were guests, Joe's position was even lower than usual, if that was possible, but he always tried to help me if he could. میگه وقتی که مهمون بود معمولا پوزیشن جو خیلی پایین تر از حد معمول بودش، جایگاهش پایین تر از حد معمول بود، اما همیشه سعی میکرد که به من کمک کنه وقتی که میتونه. Sometimes he comforted by giving me extra gravy. A sauce made by mixing the fat and juice exuded by meat during cooking with stock and other ingredients. آب گوشت، یه سوسی که میرزن روش. Sometimes he comforted me by giving me extra gravy. و از موقع‌ها comforted me منو راهنمایی میکرد یا راحتم میکرد با اینکه مثلا آب گوشت و سس رو داره بهم میده. He did that. No. اون الان دوباره این کار کرد. دلداری میداد. Comforted me. Just imagine, boy, said Mr. Pumpelchuk, if your sister hadn't brought you up. You listen to this, said my sister to me crossly. If, as I say, she didn't spend her life looking after you, where would you be now? اگر که همونطور که بهت گفتم، اگر که زندگیشو نمیذاش برای تو الان کجا بودی؟ جو offered me more gravely. جو بازم به هم سوسه گوش داد. He was a lot of trouble to you, madam. اون دردسر خیلی زیادی واسه شما درست میکنه خانم. Mr. Wopsle said what is this? Say
sympathetically.
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 Sympathetically. Sympathetically. Sympathetically. Sympathetically.
Sympathetically. از روی همدردی. Feeling, showing or expressing sympathy. It was a lot of trouble to you, madam. Mr. Wopsle said sympathetically to my sister. Trouble? She cried. Trouble? And then she started on a list of all my illness, accidents, and crimes, while everybody except Joe looked at me with disgust. میگه که اون خیلی باز شما دردسر درست میکنه. دردسر شروع کرد به گریه کردن. دردسر و شروع کرد به لیستی از مشکلات و اشتباهات و جرایم و ایلنس، بیماری های من گفتن، در حالی که همه به جز جو داشتن که با تنفر من نگاه میکرد. Joe added more gravely to the meat swimming on my plate, and I wanted to pull Mr. Wopsle's nose. جو دوباره آب گوش ریخت در حالی که در حالی که شنا میکرد دیگه توی ظرفم گوشته. I wanted to pull Mr. دوست داشتم دماغ اونو بذارم توی آب گوشته، بکشم، دوست داشتم دماغش رو بکشم. I wanted to pull Mr. Wopsle's nose. Joe added more gravy to the meat swimming on my plate. به گوشتی که توی ظرفم شناور بود آب گوشت بیشتری اضافه کرد. In the end, Mrs. Joe stopped for breath and said to Mr. Pumpchuck, have a little brandy, uncle. There is a bottle already open. برندی میخوای عمو؟ عمو دیگه یا عمس؟ عمو برندی میخوای؟ There is a bottle already open. یه شیشه باز داریم. It had happened at last. بالاخره اتفاق افتاد. اینکه شیشه رو خواستن چک بکنن. No, she would discover I had stolen some brandy and put water in the bottle. حالا اون کشف میکردش که من شیش برندی رو دزدیدم و آب ریختم توش. Mr. Pumpchuck held his glass up to the light, smiled importantly at it, and drank it. His glass up to the light. لیوانش رو به سمت نور گرفت، لبخند زد و نوشیدش. به سمت نور گرفت انگار که آدم مهمی باشد. Smiled importantly. مثل یک فرد مهم لبخند زد. When immediately afterwards he jumped up and began to rush round the room in a strange wild dance. We all stared at him in great surprise. Repeat again. When immediately afterwards وقتی که به محض بعد از این اتفاق به محض این کار he jumped up and began to rush around the room پرید سریع از جاش پرید و شروع کرد to rush a sudden quick movement around the room in a strange wild dance شروع کرد به رقصیدن یک رقص بیگانه strange we all stared at him in great surprise stare at him مثل بازیگر مثلا بهش خیره شدیم we all stared at him was he mad دیوونه شده I wondered if I had murdered him but if so how شگفت‌زده می‌شدم اگر که می‌کشتمش ولی اینطور نبود فکر کردم آیا من رو کشتم ولی اگر اینطور نبود چطوری At last he threw himself gasping into a chair gasping gasp is a convulsive gasping is a convulsive catching of breath convulsive means producing or consisting of convulsions به سختی نفس زدن At last he threw him gasping into a chair crying medicine then I understood در نهایت نفس زدن در حالی که فریاد میزد دارو خودش رو روی یک صندلی انداخت آن موقع متوجه شدم Instead of filling up the brandy bottle with water I had به جای پر کردن اون برندی با آب I had put Mrs. Joe's strongest and most unpleasant medicine in by mistake به جاش داروی قوی ترین و ناخوشایندترین داروی unpleasant ناخوشایندترین داروی خانم جو رو ریخته بودم روش That was what the big brown bottle contains اون بطری بزرگ شامل این میشد But how could my medicine get into a brandy bottle? asked my sister. خالم پرسید چطوری این داروی من رفته توی بطری برندی. Fortunately means it is fortunate that. Fortunate means favored by or involving good luck, lucky. خوشبختانه. Fortunately, she had no time to find the answer as Mr. Pumblechook was calling for a hot rum to remove the taste of medicine. A hot rum. عرق نیشکر رام. درخواست یک رام داغ کرد تا مزه اون دارو رو از بین بره. And no, she said, when the fat man was calmer.
Calmer.
Calmer. Calmer means calm down, means not showing or feeling nervousness, anger or other strong emotions. So calmer means آرام. What's calmer? You must all try Uncle Pumblechook present to us. And repeating again. And no, she said, when the fat man was calmer. گفتش که و حالا این خواهر گفت and no. When the fat man was calmer, وقتی که مرد آرومتر شد. You must all try Uncle Pumblechook present to us. باید هممون تلاش کنیم که پامپلچوک میخواد که پرزنت کن. پرزنت منظور نمایشه یا هدیه عمو چوک برای ما. عمو پامپلچوک رو پرزنت میشه هدیه، علاوه بر نمایش میشه اهدا کردن. A really delicious meat pie. یک پای گوشت خوشمزه. That's right, Mrs. Joe. And Mr. Pumblechook looking more cheerful now. Bring in the pie. و آقای پامپلچوک looking more cheerful now. با تشکر بیشتری. cheerful با تشکر میشه دیگه. Bring in the pie. Bring in the pie means پای را بیاورید. You shall have some, Pip, said Joe kindly. جو مهربانانه گفتش که باید یه چیزایی داشته باشی پیپ، باید کمی بخوری. You shall have معنیش اینه که باید داشته باشی و بخوریش. You shall have some, Pip. Some people. I know what would happen next. I could not sit there any longer. I jumped down from the table and ran out of the room. But at the front, I know what, or I repeat again the last sentence. I knew what would happen next. من میدونستم که بعد چه اتفاقی میفته. I could not sit there any longer. نمیتونستم دیگه اونجا بشینم. I jumped down from the table and ran out of the room. پریدم پایین از میز و از اتاق فرار کرد. But at the front door I ran straight into a group of soldiers. در جلویی مستقیم رفتم توی یک گروهی از سربازان. Mrs. Joe was saying as they came out of the chicken, the pie has gone. خانم جو اون جلوی اون آشپزخونه گفتش که پای رفته، کیک پای رفته. But stopped when she saw the soldiers. وقتی که سربازا رو دید متوقف شد. Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, said the officer in charge. رئیسشون گفتش که ببخشید خانم و آقایان. I'm here in the king's name and I want the blacksmith. به دستور در حقیقت پادشاه اینجا من آهنگر رو میخوام. And why do you want him? said my sister crossly. خواهرم به ترشرویی گفتش که چرا اونو میخواین؟ Madam, replied the officer politely. با خیلی مؤدبانه گفتش که خانم. Speaking for myself, I'd like the pleasure of meeting his fine wife. speaking for the king. I'd like him to repair those handcuffs. باعث خوشبختیه که همسر خوبشون رو دارم میبینم. به گفته شاه I like him to repair those handcuffs. قراره که هندکرافتاش رو تعمیر کنه. دستبندش رو قراره که تعمیر کنه. Very good said Mr. Pumpchuck clapping. شروع کرد دست زدن. The soldiers waited in the kitchen while Joe lit the forge fire and started work. سرباز اونجا وایسادن در حالی که جو lit the forge fire آتش رو شروع کرد به روشن کردن. lit the forge means a blacksmith workshop. Lit means
lit.
Light means روشن کردن. I began to feel better now that everyone had forgotten the missing pie. احساس بهتر کردم وقتی که همه فراموش کردن اون پای گم شده رو. How far are we from the marshes? asked the officer. گفتش که چقدر از اون باطلاق دوریم، از مرداب دوریم. About a mile, replied Mrs. Joe. خانم جو گفتش که بودن یک. That's good, we'll catch them before it's dark. خوبه، قبل از اینکه هوا تاریک بشه میگیریمشون. Convict officer. Ask Mr. Woosbell. Convict means a person found guilty. مجرمان، جرمسران. officer این فارسی افسر، سرکار افسر. Ask Mr. Woopsell. Yes, to escape a convict out on the marshes. Has anyone here seen them? کسی اونا دیده؟ The other all shook their heads. Nobody asked me. همه سرشون رو تکون دادن به جز من. When the handcuffs were ready, Joe suggested we should go with the soldiers, and as Mrs. Joe was curious to know what happened, she agreed. وقتی که اون هندیکرافت آماده شد، دستبند آماده شد، جو پیشنهاد داد که ما باید بریم با سربازا بریم و خانم جو was curious کنجکاو بود که بدونه چه اتفاقی افتاده و قبول کرد. So Joe, Mrs. Woopsell and I walked behind the man through the village and out on the marshes. I hope we don't find those poor men, Joe. I whispered. امیدوارم که اون مرد فقیر رو پیدا نکنیم جو. I whispered means whisper، پچ کردم. I hope not, ate peep. امیدوارم، من همینطور امیدوارم. He whispered back یعنی اونم پچ رو پاسخ داد. These interesting sentences. Whispered back. It was cold with an east wind blowing from the sea. سرد بود به خاطر بادی که از غرب روی دریا می‌وزید. And it was getting dark و داشت تاریک می‌شد. Suddenly we all stopped. We heard shots in the distance. ناگهان هم متوقف شدن و صداهایی رو از فاصله شنیدن. صدای فریاد رو، خروش رو شنیدن. This way, run. This way, run. The officer ordered and we all rushed in a direction. از این طرف اون آفیسر فرمان داد و همه به سمت اونجا دویدیم به سرعت. The shots become clear. اون ناله ها واضح تر شد. Murder. Escaped convict. Escaped convict. مجرم فراری. Help. At last we discovered two men fighting each other. و در نهایت ما 2 نفر دیدیم که دارن با هم دعوا میکنن. One was my convict and the other was the man who had run away when I had seen him near their shelter. یکیش که اون مجرم من بود و اون یکی اونی بودش که وقتی که اونجا دیدمش فرار کردش. سری پیش که دیده بودمش فرار کرد. Somehow the soldiers held the men apart and put the handcuffs on them. یکی اون مردا رو از هم جدا کردن. سربازها جدا کردن مردا رو and handcuffs. Handcuffs means a pair of lockable liquid metal rings for securing a prison's breast. دستبند. Here he is. I'm holding him for you. Shouted my convict. میگه برات نگهش داشتم. Officer, he tried to murder me. میگه که افسر اون سعی کرد که من بکشه. Cried the other man. یکی مرد داشت میگفت که این قراره من بکشه. His face was bleeding and he was clearly very frightened. خونریزی داشتن. His face was bleeding. داشت خون میومد ازش، از صورتش. And he was clearly very frightened. و خیلی ترسیده بود. Murder him. No, said the first. That would be too easy. بکشیدش. نه. این کار خیلی راحته. I want him to suffer more. من میخوام که بیشتر زجر بکشه. Back on the prison ship. برگرده به اون زندان ها که روابند. He's lying as he did at our trial. داره دروغ میگه. در امتحان، در مصیبت ما یک دروغ گوه. در دروغ همونطور که در محکمه دروغ گفت. It's very interesting. He's lying as he did at our trial. یعنی دروغ داره میگه همونطور که در محکمه دروغ گفت. Trial so means محکمه. دادرسی، محاکمه، دادخواهی. You can't trust. What is this? Compassion. Compassion. Name of some place. You can't trust compassion or somebody. Just then he noticed me for the first time. I shook my head at him. وقتی که اولین بار به من متوجه من شد، درست در آن موقع برای اولین بار متوجه من شد. I shook my head at him. to show that I had not wanted the soldiers to find him. من سرمو تکون دادم که نشون بدم که من نمیخواستم که سرباز اونو پیدا کنم. He stared at me, but I did not know if he understood or not. Stared at me به من خیره شده بود. But I did know if he understood. اما من نفهمیدم که نمیدونستم که اون فهمید این قضیه رو یا نه. The prisoners were taken to the riverside. بردنش به اون سمت رودخانه riverside, where a boat was waiting to take them on the prison ship. نگهبان اونو بردنش اونور که یه قایق منتظر بود که اونا رو ببره توی توی زندان. Just as he was about to leave, my convict said. زمانی که داشت میرفت این مجرم من گفتش که Officer, after my escape, I stole some food from the blacksmith house. Bread, cheese, brandy, and a meat pie. I'm sorry, I ate your pie, blacksmith. باشه آفیسر، بعد از اینکه من فرار کردم یا سری غذاها رو من دزدیدم، نون و پنیر و برندی و این چیزا. و آهنگر، من ازت معذرت میخوام که پایتو خوردم. I'm glad you did, replied Joe kindly. واسه افتخار بود. جو گفتش که واسه افتخار بود. We don't know why you are a convict. ما نمیدونستیم که چرا شما مجرم شدیم. But we wouldn't want you to die of hunger. اما ما نمیخواستیم که شما از گرسنگی بمیرید. The man rubbed his eyes with the back of his dirty hand. Rub means an act of rubbing. مالش دادن. مرد دست چشماش رو با پشت دستای کثیفش مالش داد. این یه اصطلاح داریم اینجا just as he was about to leave. about to یعنی که نزدیک اتفاق بودش. We watched the small boat carry him out to the middle of the river. به اون قایق کوچیکی داشت اونو میبردش به میانه رودخانه نگاه کردیم. Where the great black person ship stood high out of the water. جایی که اون زندانهای شناور سیاه روی آب در اون دور دست روی آب بودن. stood means stand. پاورجا بودن دیگه، ایستاده بودن. held by its rusty chains. rusty means affected by rust. rust means زنگ زده. rusty. با زنجیرهای زنگ زدهشون نگهداری می شدن. He disappeared into the ship and I thought that was the last I had seen of him. توی اون کشتی ها ناپدید شد و من فکر می کردم که این آخرین باره که اون رو دیدم. این هم از فصل دوم کتاب بود. کتاب کلا 19 فصل داره و منتظر فصل‌های بعدی باشید.
convict
frightened roast
staring, staring.
bald, bald,
proudly, proudly.
elbow, elbow, ashamed, ashamed, whisper, whisper,
Firmly, firmly.
unpleasantly, unpleasantly, gravy,
gravy,
Crossly, crossly.
gravy, gravy, sympathetically, sympathetically,
Disgust, disgust.
gravy,
gravy,
rush, rush,
Strange, strange. Star, star.
Gasping, gasping.
rum, rum,
present, present,
fortunately, fortunately,
Calmer, calmer.
Cheerful, cheerful. Charge, charge.
Crossly, crossly.
Politely, politely.
light, light,
forge, forge, lit, lit,
Handcuff, handcuff. Marsh, marsh. Convict, convict.
Blowing, blowing.
shout, shout,
bleed, bleed, bleeding, bleeding,
rusty, rusty,
Think, think.